I really wanted to do this video on the water so I could show you everything, but you know. Hey, I'm Ben. I'm a huge fly fisherman, and today I'm going to talk about fishing frog water. This is mostly geared towards trout fishing, but it generally applies to fishing in any river. I'll talk about what frog water is, where to find fish in frog water, and how to fish it. So, frog water is a stretch of deep, slow-moving water. It's like a big ditch. The water isn't real trouty. There aren't any features like seams and riffles that are obvious fishy spots. It's a big, featureless expanse. You've probably seen water like this and maybe just walked past it to a fishier spot, or maybe your guide told you to take a break while they just rode through it. That's because frog water can be difficult to fish. It's not for everyone, but if you're in the mood to try something different and you go about it the right way, you will find out there are lots of fish in the frog water. Big ones too. What I find myself doing in frog water is I just fish it like a lake. Fish the structure. That may sound weird when you see frog water as a featureless expanse, but you just have to look a little closer. Let's start on the bank. That's a major piece of structure. Frog water tends to have steep banks. That means there's probably enough depth to hold fish on the bank. There's probably vegetation on the bank. Tall grass, willows, that's good cover too. So there might be fish on the bank, but where? They're on those little points and coves, mostly the points. What I mean is break that bank down into really small pieces. Like there's a clump of grass that sticks out 8 inches past everything else. That's where a fish is. There's a little indentation the size of a basketball. That's where a fish is. Look for those little tiny features. If I was nerdier, I'd use a term like micro features, but I'm not, so I won't. The point here is don't just cast anywhere at the bank. Cast at something specific on that bank. You need some current for all this bank stuff to work though. If there's no current, the fish aren't gonna hold in one spot. But it only takes just a little bit of moving water to keep them there. Moving out from the bank, a common thing to find in frog water is a weed edge. Underwater vegetation is growing in the shallower water near the bank, and as you get out into deeper water, there is a hard defined line that goes from weeds to water. That's a good place to fish. There is food in the weeds for the fish and also protection. They can hide there easily. Even in deep water, fish will sit on that edge just under the surface and you can get them on dry flies. Another part of the weed edge that you can fish is on the inside. There's often a strip of clear water between the bed of weeds and the bank. It's only a foot or two wide, but it's a cool little cruising and feeding lane for fish. Don't overlook that inside weed lane. So the bank and the weed edges are probably the most significant features in frog water, but there's other stuff you can look for too. How about rocks? If there's a long, straight, grassy bank and there's one rock on it, you throw your fly at that rock. It doesn't even have to be big, it's just something different, and that's where a fish will be. Even better, if there's a little pile of small rocks just off the bank, I promise you there is a fish there. Sometimes there's a giant rock. Maybe it's on the bank, maybe it's in the middle of the river. Doesn't matter. That rock is a fish magnet compared to everything else around it. How about the bottom structure? Frog water isn't just a big bathtub. There are shelves and drop-offs, sandbars, or maybe just a deeper spot. Sometimes these features can be hard to identify because it's deep. Try looking for subtle changes in the surface of the water that can be a sign of what's happening under the water. If you can find places where the bottom contour changes in frog water, fish there. Okay, we've covered where to fish the frog water, but what about how? The way I see it, if you want to fish frog water, you have two options. Either hunt something up or pick the water apart methodically. Which method I choose depends first on what kind of mood I'm in, and second, if I'm on foot or in a boat. Let's start with hunting something up. You're looking more than you're casting. If you just take a minute and chill out, you're gonna see something. Find a point of reference and keep watching that area. If you see that thing again, you've got a catchable fish. I'm usually doing the hunting thing if I'm on foot. If you're fishing frog water from land, you're probably surrounded by trees and tall vegetation that makes casting a total pain. So don't do it. Find a fish, then cast. I'm not just banging my fly out to that weed edge over and over. I'm looking and hunting for something. Now, if I'm on a boat, I'm probably blind casting to that weed edge or bank or whatever. I'm methodically covering everything that I think might have a fish on it. Time out, let's take a drink real quick. Okay, let's talk about what's on the end of my line. First of all, frog water is not the place for Euro. I'm doing dry, streamer, maybe bobber nymph. Dry flies are great for that inside weed lane, the outside edge, or rocks. Streamers, same thing, but the inside lane might be tough. Frog water is typically deep, so a bobber nymph might be an obvious choice. It's my last choice. I just find it boring. The bobber is slowly creeping its way downriver, and my attention span is maxed out. I'm not saying it doesn't work, I just don't like it. Here's a pro tip for you. If you are nymphing deep, slow water, it's perfectly fine to put a little action on your nymphs. Move that bobber around a little, make those flies do something, and it might draw a strike. Okay, we're coming to the end here, but I have a few more things I want to say about frog water. I talked about hunting up a fish or casting at specific spots, but it's also perfectly fine to just chuck it out there into the middle of the river. If you've got a streamer on, that's a great way to just search around. And you've probably seen fish just randomly rise in the middle of a long, slow piece of frog water. I don't know what they're doing either, but there's nothing wrong with just drifting your fly right down the middle. I wouldn't say it's a high percentage way of fishing, but neither is fly fishing in general. And hey, you never know. Also, fish will pod up and rise in frog water. You might find a group of them chowing down. It's usually on something tiny, and those fish are usually picky. If you're looking for a challenge, find potted fish in slick water. Let's finish by talking about fish that are moving and fish that are holding. I touched on this earlier when I was talking about fishing from the bank. With trout in a river, they are typically staying in one place, right? They're waiting for food to come to them. In frog water, when there is zero current, trout behave like they're in a lake and they cruise around looking for food. Remember this, if you see a fish rise, that fish isn't necessarily staying in one spot. These fish are moving around. They're hunting for food, just like you're hunting for them. Frog water gets a bad rap, I think. It really isn't all that difficult to fish. It's just tedious. It takes a while, and you have to search just a little bit harder to find the fishy parts of what seems like a very unfishy part of the river, but in reality is absolutely full of fish. So that's it. Thank you for watching another one of my huge fly fisherman videos. I will see you in the next one. Until then, stay froggy and stay huge. It's been like a month and a half, I think, since I've been fishing. That's perfectly fine.